At the beginning of the movie, we see a blind woman named Reatrei, a music teacher at an orphanage. As she enters the children's room, her foot bumps into a knife. Confused, she picks it up and feels something on it. And when she smells it, she is shocked to realize it is blood. She then touches a child and discovers that the child is dead, and it is soon revealed that all the children in the room have been brutally murdered. Just then, a woman and a girl arrive, and upon seeing the horrific scene, the woman screams for help, accusing the teacher of killing the children. After this, we see that the villagers have hanged Reatrei from a tree and are demanding that she be burned. In tears, Reatrei pleads with Veta to help her, but a man sets Reatrei on fire. As she burns, the villagers call her a demon, and after some time, her burning body falls into a well. A clip reveals that the orphanage, founded in 1980, housed 8 children orphaned by the Cambodian genocide. In 1983, tragedy struck when 7 were brutally murdered. Enraged villagers killed the teacher, and eerie events followed, prompting them to abandon the orphanage. Next, Soom asks Pang about the orphanage renovation, noting the children can't stay in abandoned houses, to which Pang says it's nearly done, but needs to check with the workers. Soom then says he is going to get a new doctor and leaves. Later, Soom is driving Dr. Dallin and her sister Nika when they pass by the new orphanage, and he mentions that in a few days, it will be the anniversary of the deaths of the 7 children. As they continue, he spots Pang and stops the car, asking what happened, to which Pang explains that he has a flat tire. Soom introduces him to Dallin and tells Dallin that Pang is the engineer who renovated their new orphanage. He then advises Pang to be careful and says he will first take Dallin and Nika to the orphanage. Soom brings Dallin and Nika to the old orphanage, where Dallin meets Pissy, and they are overjoyed to see each other. Nika steps outside and looks around at the orphanage, but Dallin interrupts and introduces her to Pissy. Soom then hands Dallin her suitcase and tells her that he is leaving to visit the construction site. Pissy brings them inside and introduces them to Trey and Feek, who greet Dallin before running off to play outside. Nika goes outside to play with the kids, and during this, Gekli is seen standing by the well. As she peers inside, she becomes visibly disturbed and starts to back away, but gets startled by Pissy, who reminds her that she told her not to come there. Gekli apologizes to her, and Pissy then moves toward the well and closes the lid. That evening, during dinner, Gekli becomes fixated on a balloon outside. Pissy notices her staring and looks outside, but she sees nothing. Trey tells Pissy that he doesn't want to share a bedroom with Gekli, and when she asks why, Peek says it's because they said she saw a ghost and left her alone. Pissy asks him how he can say such a thing and asks them to apologize to Gekli, and they reluctantly comply. Pang then gives Gekli a music box, saying he thinks it's still good for her to play with, and she thanks him for the gift. However, as she looks out the window, she sees a woman standing outside. Later, Gekli is standing at the window looking outside when Pissy approaches her, telling her to go to sleep, saying it's too late to see the scenery now, to which Gekli replies that she thinks there is something wrong with this place. Pissy lays Gekli on the bed and assures her that she doesn't need to be afraid because she, Dallin, Pang, and the others are there to protect her. Gekli then says, "If a stranger comes, please don't open the door," to which Pissy replies, "Got it, now sleep well." After Pissy leaves, Gekli looks out the window again and is terrified to see that the lid of the well is open. Meanwhile, Pissy notices the kitchen sink tap is left running. She immediately turns it off and grabs a mop to clean up the spilled water. When she gets up to wring out the mop, she sees a balloon outside. Ignoring it, she bends down to mop again, and the balloon slowly starts to drift away. And when she stands up, the balloon is gone. Just then, a knock on the door occurs, and she moves toward the door as the knocking continues. But when she finally opens it, she finds the balloon there. Pissy brings the balloon inside and ties it to the TV, but as she turns to leave, the TV suddenly turns on by itself. Startled, Pissy looks at the screen and realizes the video playing is of Reatrei and her students. In the video, Reatrei says, "I spent my life doing good things, but in the end, I was treated unfairly." She then looks up and asks, "Do I deserve it?" And before Pissy can react, the TV shuts off. Pissy turns around and notices a breeze coming in through the window. Intrigued, as she moves closer to check, She is horrified to see Reatrai's ghost standing outside. Frozen in terror, she watches as the ghost moves closer and suddenly attacks her, wrapping the curtain around her neck before forcefully throwing her out of the window. Wounded, Pissy struggles to get up, but Reatrai's ghost strangles and lifts her into the air, commanding her to say her name. As Pissy calls out her name, she gets possessed and then collapses to the ground. Gekali wakes up to the sound of a noise and notices her bedroom door creaking open. Frightened, she steps outside only to find the balloon in the living room. And just then, the TV turns on, playing the video of Reatrei and her students. Moments later, the screen goes dark, and looking down, she sees a shadow stretching across the floor. Trembling, she steps forward and finds Pissy standing outside. Just then, the TV flickers back on, showing Reatrai's students playing, until they turn to stare directly at Gekali, and Pissy asks in or out. Gekali turns to flee, but gets terrified seeing the word enter written on the balloon. Gekali rushes upstairs for help, but finds the door locked. Suddenly, a noise behind her makes her turn, and her eyes widen in horror as she sees Pissy's shadow slowly ascending the stairs. Gekali freezes, heart pounding, as the sound of footsteps grows closer, then abruptly stops. Terrified, she cautiously moves toward the stairs to check, but Pissy lunges at her from the darkness, grabbing her by the throat and lifting her into the air, commanding, "Say my name." Struggling for breath, Gekali calls her name and becomes possessed. The next day, when Dallin comes downstairs, she finds Pissy sitting there, washing clothes, and vegetables are oddly chopped and scattered across the kitchen. Pissy suddenly asks, "Do you think my kids are cute?" Confused, Dallin steps closer and asks if she's okay. Instead of answering, Pissy asks, "Will you take responsibility if something happens to them?" Dallin hesitantly agrees, and Pissy instructs her to dry the shirts. Scared, as Dallin bends down to pick up the basket, Pissy suddenly grabs her and forces her head into a tub of water. Struggling, Dallin manages to lift her head, only to see Pissy standing in the kitchen. Perplexed, Dallin approaches Pissy, but Pissy suddenly grabs her, trying to force her face into boiling water, but pain rushes in, shoving Pissy aside. She quickly grabs a knife and lunges at Dallin, but pain blocks her, getting injured. He restrains her as she struggles, and she lets out a piercing scream that shakes the house. But after a tense moment, she collapses unconscious, and silence falls. Later, the kids enter Pissy's room to check on her, and as they approach, Nika is terrified when she sees Pissy's reflection in the mirror. But when she looks at the bed, Pissy is not there. Suddenly, Pissy appears behind her, and in the blink of an eye, she is back on the bed. The next day, Pang asks Sum, "Did Reatrei really kill 7 children?" Sum replies that he has no idea since he arrived at the orphanage after the tragedy, but it's possible. He mentions that he knew a friend of Reatrei's who was arrested a few years ago for murdering her own daughter. Pang then asks, "Do you think the two of them were working together?" To which Sum says he is not sure. That night, when Dallin goes to check on the kids, she notices that the window in their room is open. As she moves to close the curtain, she freezes in horror, seeing Reatrei's ghost standing in the darkness. Scared, Dallin turns away, but finds the balloon in the room, and when she glances back, the ghost is gone. Gekali asks, did she saw something? To which Dallin hesitates before shaking her head. And just then, Gekali suddenly lies down as if she has seen someone. Dallin goes to check on Pissy, and as she does, we see something crawling beneath the skin of Pissy's face. Frightened, Dallin watches as the veins on Pissy's face disappear. Shocked, she leans in for a closer look and checks Pissy's eye, which suddenly shifts toward her. Startled, Dallin moves closer to examine her nerve, but Pissy abruptly grabs her hand, and Dallin falls back in an attempt to free herself. And when she sits up, she sees Pissy now sitting on her bed. Dallin stands and calls out her name, but to her horror, she sees Reatrei's ghost before her. Pissy suddenly grabs Dallin by the throat and hurls her across the room before pouncing on her, strangling her. Pang rushes in to intervene, but Pissy effortlessly throws him aside. Pang quickly regains his footing and manages to shove Pissy away. He asks if she's okay, but they realize Pissy has vanished, and just then, they hear growling outside. They rush outside, horrified to see Pissy suspended in midair, and as Pang moves forward to help, he is hurled aside, causing a cupboard to topple over him. Dallin hurries to his side. struggling to lift the heavy cupboard. And at that moment, Pissy plummets to the ground. She turns to them and says, "We never should have moved here." And then she is abruptly dragged away by Reatrei. Pang tells Dallin to help her, and she dashes after Pissy. However, she finds her levitating and Reatrei's ghost seated at the piano. And as it screams, Pissy crashes onto the piano, only to be dragged away once more. Dallin and Pang hear the commotion and rush upstairs, where they find Pissy grabbing Fake. Pang tells her to stay away from him, and just then, Nika arrives, prompting Dallin and Pang to hurry to her and protect the other children. Reatrei attempts to kill Fake, but Pissy fights back, forcing Reatrei to release him. She then throws the shard aside and tells Dallin and Pang not to let it harm their children. Stepping back, she tearfully says she loves them all before Reatrei suddenly grabs her by the throat and lifts her into the air, and they watch helplessly as Reatrei hurls Pissy down the stairs, killing her. The next morning, as ambulance carries Pissy's corpse, Pang realizes that Dickley is not with them. Pang and Dallin check on her, and she says she heard Pissy crying in pain, blaming them for her death. She adds, "Because I'm abnormal. I hear things I shouldn't hear and see things I shouldn't see." Pang asks who she wants to see most, to which she turns to him and replies, "Mother." Meanwhile, Nika asks Trey and Fake why they call Pissy Mom, to which Trey replies they have no parents, only her, and now she's gone too. Just then, Nika notices a balloon floating above the well. Intrigued, she follows it as it drifts toward a bunker. Determined to catch it, she climbs the bunker, reaching out for the balloon, only to fall into the bunker. After a while, when Nika regains consciousness, Fake asks if she's okay and reassures her not to be afraid, promising to get Dallin for help. As Nika stands up, she notices the space around her is cluttered with belongings, as if someone had once lived there. She then spots the balloon and reaches for it, only to discover a dress pinned to a wooden board. Suddenly, she hears a strange noise, but when she turns around, she sees nothing. Only then the board begins to shake violently, and before she can react, the balloon bursts, splattering blood all over her. Terrified, she realizes the dress is missing, and as she turns around, Pang arrives and tries to calm her down. Dallin then enters the basement, embracing Nika to comfort her, and she gently tells her not to be afraid. As Pang scans the area, Nika points toward the dress. While inspecting the surroundings, Pang discovers a box filled with video cassettes, and meanwhile, Dallin approaches the dress, but accidentally steps on a nail. She picks it up and realizes it matches one of the nails pinned to the dress. Later, Pang tells Dallin that he believes these videotapes might provide clues about Pissy's death. He then inserts one of the tapes into the player, and a video begins to play on the TV. Meanwhile, Gekali's bed suddenly shifts, startling her awake, and as she sits up, she notices the balloon beside her bed. Curious, she approaches it and finds a note attached to its string that reads, "I want what I don't have." Just then, the bedroom door creaks open on its own, and the balloon begins to float toward the doorway and drifts out of the room. In the video, a girl screams as several people restrain her, and one of the men orders another to strike her with a nail. The man drives the nail into the dress, and the girl shrieks in agony as if she can feel it, and the tape abruptly stops. Dallin says that the dress is the same one they saw in the basement and asks, "Is it Reatrei's dress?" Pang wonders, was Pissy also cursed by Reatrei? And just then, the tape continues playing. In the footage, two men take the girl away, and one of them asks, "Can Reatrei's curse be removed?" To which the old man responds, "I don't think it's that easy, unless the girl sacrifices herself," and suggests, "Give Reatrei what it wants." In the second tape, a girl introduces herself as Sanita, an orphan who lives in the Bright Orphanage with the 7 children who died. She adds she has a lot of strange diseases and mentions white balloons around this place. After the tape ends, Dallin picks up a photo and says she saw a white balloon in the children's room. They then play the third tape, where the cameraman Fat approaches a girl named Nita, who tells him that the teacher visited her last night. He asks if the teacher hurt her, to which Nita responds that she was told to kill her kitten. She then asks if he sees the balloon coming, and when he says he can't, she hides under her bedsheet, saying she is scared. Pang tells Dallin that those cursed by Reatrei sleep at noon and do what she wants at night, to to which she says Pissy seems to be in the same situation. He then plays the fourth tape, in which Nita is standing in front of Reatrei's dress, and she asks Fat if he heard the teacher calling her. She says the teacher wanted her to stay with her, but she didn't want to, and if she doesn't listen to the teacher, she doesn't know what the punishment will be. She then slits her own face with a knife and turns to Fat, asking, "Is this a good punishment?" Suddenly, the wooden board shakes, launching a nail at Fat, and then Nita lunges and stabs him with a knife. Meanwhile, the balloon leads Gekli to another balloon, and when she removes the note from the thread, it reads, "But you do, what is that?" Then, many other balloons appear and begin to glow red. Frightened, Gekli grabs a balloon and steps forward, and the scene then shifts back to Dallin and Pang, who watch as Nita says that the teacher wants her eyes, but Fat rushes toward her and stabs her with the knife. Gekli follows the balloon to the bunker, where she finds countless others. Reatrei's ghost asks, "Have you thought of the answer?" And suddenly, the wooden board shakes violently, and the balloons start bursting one by one. Reatrei then asks, "Did you hear my request? Or do you want to be punished?" Panicked, Gekli reads the notes. "I want what I don't have, but you do. What is that?" Trembling, she stands just as her balloon bursts, and Reatrei demands, "Answer now." Hearing her screams, Dallin and Pang rush to the basement, where they find Gekli standing in front of Reatrei's dress, and as they approach her, she says, "She is in the room with us." Suddenly, someone runs past them, and when they turn back, they realize that Gekli is also gone. As they look around, Dallin spots Gekli sitting under the stairs, and as she approaches, a nail from the dress falls to the ground. Dallin steps closer, but Gekli suddenly grabs her by the neck, and Pang rushes to help, hurling Gekli aside. Enraged, Gekli grabs a hammer and lunges at Pang. Dallin tries to intervene, but Reatrei throws her away. Dallin grabs the fallen nail and quickly stabs it into the dress. Gekli lunges at Dallin, but Dallin stabs the nail once more, and seeing Gekli writhing in agony, Pang pleads with Dallin to stop. The next day, as Gekli rests, something crawls beneath the skin of her face. Later, when Soom visits there, Pang asks if can he borrow his car, and when he asks what happened, Pang tells him that he is looking for a journalist. Soom takes him to Fate's house, and they are shocked to see that he has no eyes. A girl asks who they are, and Fat tells her they are from the orphanage where she used to live. Pang asks, "How did they end up like this?" And Fat replies, "Reatrei wants everyone to be like her, living in a world of darkness, and to break the curse, just like Reatrei. I must live in darkness for the rest of my life." Pang asks, "Is this how you remove the curse?" To which Fat responds, "You could say that, but what Reatrei truly wants is the truth about the deaths of the 7 children." He then explains that the exorcist, who sealed Reatrei's soul, believed that only by delivering justice to her can the curse be lifted. Otherwise, those who fail will be forced to sacrifice their eyes. As they are about to leave, Fat stops them and hands Pang some photos, saying that he saw one of these people while he was working there and suspects that person might be the murderer. Pang asks, "Could it be Teacher Vicha?" To which Fat replies, he is not sure. Meanwhile, when Dallin enters Gekli's room, she finds her sitting upright on the bed. Startled, Dallin calls out to her, but suddenly, the beds in the room begin to shake violently, and Gekli lets out a piercing scream before hurling a bed at Dallin. Dallin struggles to get up, only for Gekli to throw other beds at her. After some time, Nika spots Gekli standing at a distance and hesitantly asks, "Is that you?" Gekli, however, slowly turns to face her, and before Nika can react, Gekli suddenly lunges at her, prompting Nika to sprint away and lock herself in her room. Gekli violently bangs on the door in an attempt to open it, but after some time, she stops, and Nika sees her shadow moving beneath the door. Thinking Gekli is gone, Nika steps out, but Gekli suddenly grabs her by the throat and lifts her into the air. Reatrei then tells Nika to call her name, and gasping for breath, Nika calls her name. Meanwhile, Trey and Fake wake up Dallin, who immediately asks where Nika is, and Fake replies she should be downstairs. Dallin gets up and tells Trey and Fake, "Don't leave this room no matter what." She then rushes to the basement in search of Nika and finds her unconscious, but only then she realizes Gekli is standing right behind her. Dallin gets up and cautiously approaches Gekli, but Reatrei suddenly lunges at her, pinning her against the board and declaring that they all must die. Dallin pleads with her to stop, but Reatrei insists she calls her name, and when Dallin does, Reatrei throws her aside. Desperate, Dallin grabs the music box, plays it, and asks Dallin, "What do you want to see most?" This triggers a struggle between Gekli and Reatrei lifts Gekli into the air, but after a tense moment, she suddenly collapses. Meanwhile, Pang returns to the orphanage and discovers something in the trunk of Soom's car. Intrigued, he picks up the items to examine them, and to his shock, he finds a photo of Soom with Vicha. He then opens the box containing 2 rings and a note, and as he reads it, he realizes with horror that Soom is the murderer. Soom lunges at Pang, but Pang dodges and throws him aside. Confronting him, Pang declares that he is the murderer. In response, Soom gets up and stabs him. Despite the wound, Pang punches Soom away, and when Soom recovers, Pang has already vanished. Meanwhile, Gekli wakes up and finds Dallin and Nika unconscious, but they also sitting there, scared. She rushes to them, and Dallin asks if she is injured, to which Gekli reassures her that she's fine and urges them to get out of there. But Reatrei grabs her by the throat and says, "You're not normal, and I want your eyes." Gekli struggles and responds, "You can't control me." And the moment she blinks, she is teleported in the past, holding Reatrei's hand. Gekli looks at Reatrei and says, "If you want to know the truth, I'll show you." She leads Reatrei to the children's room, where Reatrei is shocked to see Soom threatening his wife Vicha, asking why she killed their child. He then confesses to murdering all the children in her care before attempting to kill her. Vicha says, "If the father doesn't want children, why should I care?" Suddenly, Reatrei's voice echoes from outside, growing closer, and Soom warns Vicha that one day he will kill her before they both flee the scene in panic. Meanwhile, Soom finds Pang and is about to kill him, but suddenly, Reatrei pulls him back and lifts him into the air. She says she has been waiting for him for a long time and tells him to call her name, but before he can speak, Reatrei tightens her grip, and as his body goes limp, she throws him into the well. The next day, before leaving the orphanage, Gekli plays the music box one last time, placing it gently on the well, and then she releases a balloon into the sky. After this, they all fold their hands in respect to Reatrei before turning to leave, and the movie ends here.